How smart people treat toxic people. Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever walked into a room and felt like all the energy just left your body? That's the effect toxic people have on us. They drain us, they exhaust us, and worst of all, they sometimes make us question who we are. But here's the thing, toxic people aren't new. They've existed in every era, in every office, in every family, and on every team. What sets smart people apart isn't that they never encounter toxic people, it's how they respond to them. Smart people don't fight fire with fire. They don't scream back. They don't play the game because they understand something powerful. You don't win by reacting. You win by responding. Let me tell you a quick story. There was once a leader I met in a tech company. Let's call her Sarah. Sarah had a brilliant mind and an even more brilliant heart, but her team was struggling. Not because of performance, not because of results, but because of one person, one voice in the room that constantly sowed negativity, gossip, and conflict. Now, Sarah could have done what most of us would instinctively do: confront, argue, retaliate. But instead, she did something different. She listened, not to validate the toxic behavior, but to understand where it came from. Because smart people know toxic behavior is usually a mask for something deeper: fear, insecurity, or pain. And when she understood it, she set boundaries, clear, firm, respectful boundaries. Because empathy doesn't mean tolerance. Being kind doesn't mean being passive. There's a subtle but powerful difference between reacting and responding. It's one of those differences that defines emotional maturity, and it's something smart people understand instinctively. When we react, it's immediate, it's impulsive, it's driven by emotion, often without thought. It's the email you regret sending, the sharp comment you wish you could take back, or the tension you didn't mean to escalate. Reactions are fast, but they're rarely thoughtful. Smart people don't allow others to control their internal state. When someone toxic lashes out, gossips, manipulates, or provokes, most people feel triggered. And understandably so. It's human nature to defend, to argue, to hit back with equal force. But that's exactly what toxic people feed on. They want the reaction. They want your energy. They want you in the chaos with them. But responding, that's different. A response is intentional. It comes from a place of reflection, not emotion. It's not about being passive or weak. In fact, a response often takes more strength than a reaction. Because to respond, you have to pause. You have to take a breath. You have to process what was said, how it made you feel, and what the most constructive next move is for you. Smart people do this instinctively, or they learn to. They create space between the stimulus and the response. Viktor Frankl once said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. That space is everything. Toxic people don't have control over it. You do. Think about any high-stakes leader, coach, or mentor you admire. When challenged, they don't explode. They lean back. They ask questions. They speak slowly. Their words carry weight because they're chosen, not thrown. That's the kind of emotional discipline smart people develop, because they know that matching a toxic person's energy never leads anywhere good. It only brings them down to that level. So what does this look like in real life? Let's say a colleague undermines you in a meeting. The reactive version of you might snap back or stew in resentment all day. But the smart version of you pauses. You stay calm. Maybe you address it privately later. Maybe you don't give it any oxygen at all. But either way, you decide not your emotions, not the moment, and definitely not the toxic person. It's not about being emotionless. It's about being emotionally intelligent. You still feel the frustration. You still recognize the behavior is unfair or inappropriate, but you don't hand over your peace in exchange for a temporary release of anger. So when faced with toxicity, the smartest people don't fight it head on, they neutralize it with silence, with boundaries, or with grace. They don't suppress how they feel, but they master how they express it. That's real strength. That's what it means to respond instead of react. Empathy is often misunderstood. People sometimes confuse it with softness or even weakness, but real empathy isn't about being a doormat. It isn't about letting people walk all over you, excuse their bad behavior, or endlessly give second chances to those who consistently cross the line. Real empathy is powerful. And the smartest people know it's only effective when paired with boundaries. You can care deeply about someone and still say this behavior isn't okay. You can understand someone's pain without allowing that pain to spill over into your life and poison your peace. Empathy means you can look at someone and say, I see why you might be acting this way. I get that you're hurt, scared, or insecure. But that doesn't mean you let them project that pain onto you. Smart people recognize that empathy doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for someone else's comfort. It doesn't mean absorbing toxic energy just because you feel sorry for the other person. That's not empathy. And people who do that over and over again often find themselves exhausted, resentful, and drained. They mistake being understanding for being endlessly available, and they end up carrying emotional weight that was never theirs to hold. But smart people, they approach empathy differently. They use it as a lens, not as a leash. It helps them understand others, but it doesn't bind them to others. It allows them to see the truth behind someone's behavior, to recognize that the angry coworker might be dealing with something personal or that the manipulative friend might be operating from fear, but they don't use that understanding as a reason to stay in toxic situations. That's the difference. Empathy without boundaries leads to burnout. Empathy with boundaries leads to balance. Let's say someone in your life is constantly negative, always pulling you into their drama, always taking but never giving. If you're an empathetic person, your first instinct might be to help, to listen, to support, to be there no matter what. But smart people know there's a line. There's a point where your help stops being helpful and starts enabling. And when you enable toxic patterns under the banner of being empathetic, you're not helping them grow, and you're definitely not protecting yourself. That's why smart people draw clear, firm boundaries, and they stick to them. They're able to say, I care about you, but I won't allow this kind of energy into my space. Or I understand where you're coming from, but I won't tolerate being spoken to that way. It's not cruel. It's not cold. In fact, it's one of the most respectful things you can do for both you and the other person. Because when you set a boundary, you're not punishing someone. You're teaching them how to treat you. You're saying, this is how I deserve to be spoken to. This is what I will accept. This is how we move forward. Empathy is about connection, not submission. And smart people know that true connection only happens when both people feel respected, heard, and safe. If one person is constantly giving while the other is constantly taking, that's not connection. That's imbalance. So yes, lead with empathy. Always try to understand where others are coming from. Be kind, be human, be open-hearted. But don't ever let empathy become an excuse to tolerate what you know isn't healthy. Because in the end, empathy isn't about allowing everything. It's about seeing everything clearly and still choosing to protect your peace. Most of us at some point have encountered someone who just seems impossible to deal with, the kind of person who's always criticizing, always stirring conflict, always turning good moments into tense ones. And it's easy, natural even, to label them as toxic and move on. But smart people do something a little different. Before they write someone off, they ask a quiet, powerful question. What's underneath this behavior? Because toxic behavior doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's not born in a vacuum. More often than not, it's a mask a layer of defense built over time to hide something deeper. That doesn't mean it's okay, and it doesn't mean it should be accepted or tolerated, but it does mean there's usually more to the story than what's on the surface. People who are constantly negative are often people who feel out of control in their own lives. Those who criticize others harshly may be projecting the same voice that lives in their own heads. The one that says, "You're not good enough." The manipulator might have grown up feeling powerless, so they learned to control situations any way they could. The person who shuts down emotionally may have been hurt so deeply in the past that now silence feels safer than honesty. Smart people don't excuse this behavior, but they do recognize the humanity in it. They understand that behind the sharp edges is often a scared or hurting person. And just that recognition changes the way they respond. It doesn't mean they stay in unhealthy relationships or subject themselves to repeated harm, not at all. But it means they can set boundaries without hatred. They can walk away without bitterness. They don't carry resentment like a weight on their shoulders because they see the pain and they choose not to absorb it. When you start to understand that toxic behavior is often rooted in pain, your perspective shifts. Instead of taking things personally, you begin to detach. Not emotionally shut down, but detach in a way that protects your peace. You can say, "This isn't about me," and really mean it. You stop internalizing the criticism, the drama, the manipulation, because you know the source is deeper than the moment. This is where emotional intelligence comes in. Smart people develop the ability to read the room, yes, but also to read the person, to sense when someone's anger is actually fear in disguise, to notice when someone's coldness is actually self-protection. Doesn't mean you become a therapist or try to fix them. That's not your job. But it gives you clarity, and with clarity, you make better decisions. You realize you don't have to respond with anger when someone lashes out. You don't have to match their energy. You can hold your ground, protect your boundaries, and still show compassion, even if that compassion is from a distance. Some of the most toxic people you meet are simply people who never learned how to process their pain. No one taught them how to communicate, how to self-reflect, or how to heal. That doesn't make their behavior your responsibility, but it does help you understand it. And sometimes that understanding is enough to break the cycle. It's enough to help you step back without guilt, to let go without needing revenge, to forgive without re-engaging. Because at the end of the day, smart people don't waste energy fighting masks. They recognize what's behind them, and then with grace and strength, they choose peace. Every single time. In a world that often rewards loudness, dominance, and fast decisions, emotional intelligence can look almost invisible. It's quiet. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't shout or shove, but make no mistake, it is one of the most powerful tools a person can possess. And smart people know this. They understand that success, especially in relationships, whether personal or professional, isn't just about intellect or knowledge. It's about the ability to read a situation, to manage your own emotions, and to respond in ways that create connection instead of conflict. Emotional intelligence isn't soft, it's not passive, it's strategic. It's strong. It's the kind of strength that doesn't need to prove itself because it's rooted in self-awareness. When smart people encounter toxic individuals, they don't immediately react with anger or defensiveness. They observe. They pause. They consider. That pause, that moment between what someone says and how they choose to respond, is where emotional intelligence lives. It's the awareness that I don't have to be pulled into this energy. It's the ability to step back and say, what's really going on here? And most importantly, it's the discipline to choose a response that reflects your values, not your mood. Toxic people thrive on reaction. They feed off of emotional chaos. The more you argue, the more you resist, the more they pull you into their web. But smart people, through emotional intelligence, deny them that satisfaction. They remain calm, composed, not because they're suppressing how they feel, but because they've learned to manage those feelings in real time. Emotional intelligence begins with self-awareness, being able to recognize what you're feeling as you're feeling it. It sounds simple, but it's not. Most people move through the world reacting to their emotions without ever naming them. Smart people take it a step further. They recognize the feeling, understand where it's coming from, and then choose how to deal with it constructively. It also includes self-regulation, the ability to manage impulses, stay in control, and not let a single moment define your character. When someone says something disrespectful, emotionally intelligent people don't immediately retaliate. They evaluate. They understand that a single reactive moment can damage their integrity or their relationships. They prioritize long-term impact over short-term release. But emotional intelligence doesn't stop at self-management. It also includes social awareness, the ability to read others, to sense what someone might be going through, even if they aren't saying it directly. Smart people can walk into a room and sense tension. They can hear what's not being said. They know when someone's anger is a cry for help, when someone's sarcasm is really insecurity in disguise. And then there's relationship management, knowing how to influence without controlling, how to inspire without intimidating, how to navigate difficult conversations without escalating them. This is where smart people really shine. They know how to lead others, how to earn trust, and how to de-escalate toxic situations with grace. They don't let one person's toxic behavior dictate the emotional climate of the room. Instead, they set the tone. Through their steadiness, they remind others what calm looks like. Through their kindness, they remind others what respect sounds like. And through their presence, they create a space where others feel safe to be better, not because they're inspired to. Emotional intelligence is the real power because it gives you something rare in today's world: self-control in chaos, empathy in conflict, and clarity in confusion. Energy isn't just about physical strength or how many hours of sleep you got last night. It's deeper than that. It's emotional, mental, and spiritual. It's the fuel behind your focus, your creativity, your patience, and your peace. And smart people understand something many others overlook. Energy is finite. You don't have an unlimited supply, so they treat it like a valuable resource, one that must be protected, managed, and preserved with intention. When you spend time around people who uplift you, support you, challenge you in healthy ways, and encourage you to grow, your energy expands. You feel inspired, motivated, alive. But when you're around people who constantly complain, gossip, manipulate, or create drama, you feel the opposite: drained, heavy, frustrated, like you're carrying a weight that... Toxic people are experts at pulling others into their storm. They may not even realize they're doing it. It's often a learned behavior, a way they've survived or gotten attention, but regardless of the reason, the result is the same. They take up space in your mind, in your day, and in your emotional bandwidth. Smart people pay attention to how others make them feel, not just in the moment, but over time. They ask themselves honest questions. Do I feel lighter or heavier after spending time with this person? Do I feel heard, respected, and safe? Or do I feel anxious, defensive, and small? And when the answer becomes clear, they act accordingly. Protecting your energy doesn't mean cutting everyone off or living in a bubble. It means creating boundaries around what you're willing to give and what you're no longer available for. Smart people aren't afraid to say no, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. They know that every yes to something toxic or draining is a no to something healthy and life-giving. They also understand that energy leaks happen through small, seemingly harmless things. A conversation that goes on too long, a meeting filled with passive-aggressive tension, a text thread that leaves you feeling unsettled. Over time, those small leaks add up. They erode your focus, steal your joy, and cloud your mind. Smart people learn to recognize the leaks and seal them. Sometimes that looks like spending less time with certain people. Other times it means leaving a conversation earlier, declining an invitation, or simply not engaging with someone who thrives on conflict. It could even mean stepping back from social media or taking a break from environments that don't align with your peace. The truth is, not everyone deserves full access to you. Not everyone should get your time, your attention, or your emotional investment. That might sound harsh, but it's not about arrogance, it's about self-respect. It's about understanding that your energy shapes the quality of your life. And if you're always depleted, it's not sustainable. You can't show up fully for your goals, your loved ones, or even yourself when you're running on empty. Smart people protect their energy not because they're selfish, but because they're self-aware. They know that how they feel affects how they lead, how they love, and how they live. And they refuse to spend their days constantly recovering from toxic encounters, so they choose wisely. They surround themselves with people who pour into them, not just pull from them. They curate their circles with intention, and they don't apologize for protecting their peace. Because in the end, your energy is your power, and how you guard it determines how far you can go. There's a common misunderstanding about leadership that it's about popularity, that the best leaders are the ones who are the most liked, the most agreeable, the easiest to be around. But smart people know the truth. Real leadership isn't about being liked. It's about being clear, consistent, and courageous, even when it's uncomfortable. So toxic people often test that truth. They push boundaries, challenge authority in manipulative ways, and try to gain control through subtle or sometimes obvious power plays. And in those moments, a leader is faced with a choice: lean into discomfort and hold the line, or avoid conflict to keep the peace. The smartest people, the real leaders, choose courage. They don't lead from fear. They don't worry about pleasing everyone, because they understand that when your decisions are based on being liked, you become inconsistent. You bend rules. You allow toxic behavior to slide. You say yes when you mean no. And over time, you lose credibility, not just with others, but with yourself. Being a strong leader of a team, a relationship, or even just your own life means learning to disappoint people with integrity. It means being okay with the fact that not everyone will like your boundaries. Not everyone will like your honesty. Not everyone will celebrate your growth. And that's okay. Leadership requires the courage to be misunderstood. Smart people don't seek validation from toxic people. They don't waste time trying to win over those who thrive on criticism or control. Instead, they stay anchored in their values. They lead with clarity, not with compromise. When someone crosses a line, they don't look the other way just to keep things smooth. They address it calmly, directly, respectfully. Because avoidance doesn't fix problems, it feeds them. It takes courage to have hard conversations, to say this behavior isn't acceptable here, or this dynamic needs to change. It takes courage to enforce boundaries, especially when someone pushes back or plays the victim. But that's what real leadership looks like: the willingness to be firm without being cruel, to stay grounded when others are trying to shake your foundation,